My son Alex was diagnosed with autism. I have now had 10 long, unbelievably hard years, most of which saw Alex get worse and worse and worse. I not only marked my 10-year autism anniversary in March, my son also turned 12 years old. My almost teenage son still needs help with eating, still needs someone to wipe him, still can barely talk, still can't write a single letter or draw, and he has still never had a friend. That leads me to mention one more anniversary. 2 years ago, at the Last Stand conference to be held in Washington, D.C., I made the first speech of my life. This is the 5th time now that I've stood in front of an audience at one of these meetings. Those of you who don't know me are now sitting there and wondering why the organizers of this conference would choose to put a failure like me up in the podium. You all want to hear about Dan-endorsed treatments that can help your children. You all want to hear about how autism is treatable. Believe it or not, that's exactly why I am up here. While Alex remains a very profoundly autistic child, he's still one of the great success stories that demonstrate that autism is absolutely a treatable medical condition, and that if you put in the effort, you can make your child better. No, not every child is going to be cured, but there's not a child with autism who cannot be helped. And because of the basis of biomedical treatment is a healthy diet, I haven't subtitled my talk. I changed the title of it to Dan equals Diets Are Non-Negotiable. As I mentioned a moment ago, my son Alex is now 12. Like so many of your kids, he underwent a severe and prolonged physical and mental regression as an infant. Alex was a fragile baby in many ways, but his development was normal until he received the measles, mumps, rubella shot, which he was given 3 days after his first birthday. In his 2nd year of life, he lost all eye contact and language, stopped playing and began to stim and began to vomit more and more often and never, ever had a normal bowel movement. Here is a picture of Alex on his first birthday. As I said, he got the MMR 3 days later after having finished a 10-day course of antibiotics the previous day. And here he is 4 days after that shot. Alex was diagnosed with autism on March 22, 1996. He had just turned 2. He was violently sick all that year. In the winter of his 3rd year of life, he spent 8 weeks bedridden with violent vomiting, rashes, fevers that would spike up and down all day, and constant profuse diarrhea. In fact, if it hadn't been for the gamma globulin IVs we started that April, I can't think what would have happened to him. Those IVs kept him alive for the next 7 years. We had our first appointment with Dr. Sidney Baker right after Alex's 3rd birthday. Over the years, we tried everything Sid could think of, but every intervention we tried year after year after year, either every supplement, vitamin, medication, diet, did nothing or made Alex get worse. This is a partial list of the treatments that Sid and I tried. Nothing worked, absolutely nothing. By the time he was 8, our situation had become dire. Alex was smashing everything in our house to pieces. He started small with countless remote controls, telephones, lamps, and answering machines, but he rapidly progressed to TVs, computers, pictures, and furniture. On top of that, Alex was ripping his own body to shreds. He would scratch the skin off of his arms and legs and face. He would throw himself onto his knees so hard that they would bleed constantly. He would hit his body into the floor and furniture until we had to pin him to the floor to keep him from seriously injuring himself. Alex isn't really verbal, so he couldn't tell me what was going on, but I knew in my heart that it was because he was in unbearable agony, and nothing I tried ever made it get better. At last, in November of 2002, I got a look at the source of the pain. We finally got Alex in for a colonoscopy. Here is a picture of what my son had been living with every day for at least 7 years. Even now, I can hardly stand to look at it. I'm not going to look at it. He was diagnosed with colitis, which means microscopic ulcerations of the intestines, cryptitis, which means infection and abscesses in the mucus crypts of the intestines, and lymphoid nodular hypoplasia, which is swollen lymph nodes in the intestines, which you can easily see here. 2.5 years ago, in September of 2003, we hit rock bottom. Alex was having 15 or more liquid bowel movements a day, and these were often just mucus, since he was barely eating. He was vomiting constantly. His perpetual nausea made every meal a battle. At times, he wouldn't touch food for literally 4 or 5 days at a time. He was drastically underweight. He was learning nothing. He spent most of his school day in the bathroom, and when he wasn't, he just ran around the classroom looking for things to smash. We couldn't go anywhere, and we couldn't do anything. And this, while he was on the gut medications prednisone, colizol, 6-MP, Nexium, and gastrochrome. Then, on September 27th, 2003, I got a phone call from our gastroenterologist telling me that we had to take Alex off the steroid prednisone. He'd been on so much that it was getting dangerous. At least the prednisone had controlled the worst of Alex's pain. Off it, I couldn't even bear to think about it. I sat at my desk thinking that the time had come where I should put Alex in a car and drive off a bridge, because I couldn't stand his agony anymore, and because I can't live without my angel, I'd also put myself out of my own agony. But at that worst possible moment, I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. I remembered meeting another mom at a DAN conference. I was looking through some books on diet, and she interrupted my perusal to tell me about I should buy a book called Breaking the Vicious Cycle by Elaine Gottschall, because her really sick son was doing fantastically on the diet. I had bought it at the time, but I'd forgotten about it with the 800 other things I had to do at the time. I'll never know what made me think of it at that moment, but I pulled that book off my shelf and I started to read. By the time I'd finished the 3rd chapter, I knew I had to do this diet with Alex. I put the book down on my desk for a moment thinking, I have to do this, but can I do this? Alex barely eats, and when he does eat, all he eats is potato chips, dried cereal, and French fries. And then the phone rang. It was my good friend, Kate. Judy, she said, I was online looking at some bulletin boards on inflammatory bowel disease, and I just read about this diet. It couldn't be just a coincidence. Sometimes I think that things are too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. So I called the gastroenterologist back, and I told him I was going to postpone the feeding tube that he was talking about inserting. I told him I wanted to give one last try to one last diet. And I started Alex on SED fully by dinner. Alex promptly got worse. Never ever think that things can't get worse, because they can. Night after night, I sat up in bed with Alex, running with him to the toilet every half hour while he squeezed out little bits of mucus. After 3 months of this, I couldn't take it anymore. We were facing the feeding tube, the liquid diet, and my heart was absolutely breaking. I posted a desperate plea for help on the bulletin board pecan bread, and within 4 minutes, someone replied, Judy, call me. It was signed Elaine Gottschall. Elaine, the author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle, was one of the most brilliant, brave, compassionate people I have ever known. She was a true hero, fighting for 40 years against a medical colossus that refused to accept that simply the removal of complex carbohydrates from the diet could work miracles. And yet, in the middle of her fight, and at 82 years old, she still found the time and energy to help people like me and Pam one by one. I was very, very blessed to have had her friendship for 2 years before she died this past September. Without Elaine, Alex and my story would not have had a happy ending. Because of that phone call from Elaine, I did keep going with the diet, and at about 4 months on SED, Alex suddenly went down to 4 or 5 bowel movements a day. Ever so slowly, they were becoming more and more formed. He was no longer pooping mucus, and he hadn't vomited once since we had started SCD, which in itself constituted a miracle. One by one, over the next few months, I took him off bowel medication after medication until he was no longer on any. Now, 2.5 years later, Alex has 1 to 2 formed bowel movements a day. He has vomited only 3 times since starting SCD, and he's gained almost 30 pounds. That's how I feel about it. His pica is entirely gone. Most days he eats 3 full meals a day, and sometimes he even looks positively pink with good health. And because he feels so much better, his behavior isn't just improved, it has done a 180-degree turn. All destructive behaviors are gone. All self-injurious behaviors are gone. This past year, he was able to go to his brother's birthday party at a baseball game. We can eat in restaurants now. We can go on vacations. On rainy days, we can go bowling. My Alex, who for the first 9.5 years of his life seemed to learn absolutely nothing, is now able to sight read about 30 words. He is finally toilet trained at night. His receptive language has taken off. While his expressive language is still very, very limited, he can now answer questions in complete sentences. 2 days ago, I decided to insert this little film clip into my talk. No, this is not pictures of a recovered child. I'm showing you a very autistic little boy. But I'm also showing you one that couldn't say more than 10 single words until I changed his diet. Yes, his volume is poor and his articulation is terrible. But Alex can now independently speak in sentences. And remember, too, that I did not find this diet until he was 9.5 years old.
Picture. Good job. Could you say it again for me louder? That's right. Liam is coloring. Beautiful. Okay, stand still. We're gonna watch the video. I want you to tell me something about this picture. Beautiful. Grandpa is drinking water. Excellent. I have another picture I want you to look at. Tell me about this one. Beautiful, Alex. Grandpa's reading the book. That is excellent.
Now Alex can tell his little brother to go away. And he and Liam can even manage to have a fight over a ball, with both of them yelling, "It's mine!" Alex is making progress. Yes, it is painfully slow. But please understand, before SCD, all he ever did was regress. So now for the no mercy talk. I'm warning you now, I'm a bully about this because I can get away with it, because I am a parent like you, and yes, sorry, I do know what it's like. And this gives me the perfect right to now transform myself into what one of my friends has dubbed me, the diet dominatrix. There is no room for cowardice in the world of autism. If there is one thing you must take away from this conference, it is the thought that I will clean up my child's diet no matter what it takes. I can tell you, standing up here with 10 years of autism experience under my belt, that nothing you do is going to work, or at least not work as well as it could, if your child cannot digest properly. And I will also tell you that I don't care if your child seems to be eating well and has normal bowel movements. If you're here at this DAN conference, it's because there's something wrong with your child. And if there's something wrong, it probably starts in the gut. I have often explained this concept to other parents by using the following image. Imagine that the cure for your child's illness is way up above you in the heavens. You need to climb up there to reach it, and since it is so far away, you need to build a very stable structure to get there. The most stable geometric shape is the pyramid, so we each need to build one to reach that cure. You obviously can't start to build your pyramid from the middle. You need to start with a rock-solid and broad-based foundation, and that, in the case of most, if not all, of our children, is diet. Without healthy digestion, all your other blocks will have nothing to rest on. You will never make it to that cure. In the latest version of the DAN protocol, Autism Effective Biomedical Treatments, Dr. Sidney Baker wrote in bold types, "SCD is the best treatment I have found so far for many children on the autistic spectrum." Bear in mind that Dr. Baker is the co-founder of DAN and one of the world's leading experts on the biomedical treatments of autism. Changing your child's diet is hard, and I'm not unsympathetic. In fact, quite the opposite. But I can't bear to know that you and your children are continuing to suffer because you could have removed complex carbohydrates from their diet and you didn't. I can't bear that any of you should reach that point of desperation that I reached. So yes, starting a new diet is not easy. It's hard to organize yourself at first, and it's hard to keep up with the extra cooking. And it's hard to watch your child cry when you take away the pretzels and the French fries. And on top of that, SCD is not a quick fix. It is a slow and steady process of healing. As I tell the parents I talk to, it only takes a second to break your arm, but it takes 2 months to fix it. Don't expect SCD to transform your child overnight. Some children take months to really show any improvements at all, and it's very hard to keep at it through those months of up and downs. I'm not going to lie to you. What I want you all to understand is that while I can cry with you and empathize with your pain as you struggle with this, what I can't allow you is any wiggle room. You absolutely must do this. No, your child doesn't need to have severe digestive symptoms to benefit. And no, it doesn't matter how old your child is. And no, it doesn't matter how mild or severe their autistic symptoms are. I have seen SCD benefit Children from those more sick than Alex, which is saying a lot, to those kids that are almost indistinguishable from their peers. So stop trying to come up with reasons not to do this. There are none. There are no excuses. To underline this point, I want to tell you one more story. I want to show you in pictures, more graphic than just my words, as Pam did, the power of the proper diet in the life of a child with autism. In my life, I have only met 3 children who were perhaps more sick than my Alex. And this is the story of one of them, the story of my friend Candace, who's sitting in the audience today. This is her little boy, Zach, about 18 months ago. Alex's self-abusive behaviors, as terrible as they were, paled in comparison to Zach's, who was quite literally beating himself to death, as you can see here. Candace was given my name and number by a Dan doctor who had no idea what to do about Zach. Nothing he was trying worked, and he knew about Alex's response to the specific carbohydrate diet. Just after Christmas a year ago, Candace called me to learn about the diet. And while she was spending all of her days trying to keep Zach from killing himself, she didn't complain and she didn't say, "I can't do that." In fact, she just said, "I will do it." And she started Zach on SCD when we hung up the phone. I'm telling you all now, those first 6 months on the diet were horrific for her. Zach's die-off was not to be believed. But here is Zach 6 months after starting SCD, and here he is today. Zach has now been on the diet for over a year, and he continues to improve. His self-abusive behaviors are pretty much gone, and he's been off his gut medications for months now. Candace recently emailed me this story, and I have not yet made it through reading this without crying. Zachary has been watching Aladdin on DVD all day. My sister and I did a little shopping, and she brought a small area rug, which she spread out on the kitchen floor. Zachary came to me, pushed me down on the rug, and sat between my legs with his back to me. Then he leaned forward and grabbed the edges of the rug and pulled them up. It was at this point that I realized he thought he was riding a magic carpet. I wanted to make that carpet fly more than anything in the world. In 15 months, Zach has gone from what you just witnessed to this smiling child who shows clear signs of a wonderful imagination. I told Candace that to me, Zach's transformation over these months is more of a miracle than the carpet actually flying would be. So now I'm up here begging you to learn not just from my experience, but from those of scores of other parents and children. This is Alex 2.5 years ago. He was so sick. Words fail to describe how awful our lives were then. And this is Alex now. He smiles and he laughs again, and his life is worth living. 2 years ago, I couldn't take him to the supermarket. This year, I flew to Europe alone with my 2 sons for a vacation. In 2 years, I went from spending my days mopping up blood, vomit, and diarrhea to sitting in a cafe in Corfu, Greece, sipping red wine and eating souvlaki. As I said at the start of my talk, Alex is not cured. On the other hand, he may well be the poster child for Dan's motto that autism is treatable. With dedication and hard work, there is not one of you out there who cannot make your child get better. And the foundation stone of your pyramid is diet. Please make Alex's suffering have meaning and learn from my experience. Don't say you can't, because the fact is that yes, you can. The worst thing in the world is not autism. The worst thing in the world is having to look back with regret and say, if only. Thank you.